So let's talk about draw reins and why I don't think there's any correct use for them. That's right. I said I don't think there's any way to correctly use draw reins, and here's why. Okay, so no matter where you hook them up, draw reins will act as a pulley system. It doesn't matter if they're hooked to the D-rings of the saddle. It doesn't matter if they're hooked to your girth straps on the side. It doesn't matter if they go between the legs and they hook to the underside of the girth. They will act as a pulley system. So what does this mean? Anytime the rider pulls back, which is this top arrow here, the movement on the draw rein is going to be going backwards. But then, since they're attached to the girth or another part of the horse's nose is actually going to be pulled down and in. And the nature of pulley systems is that they amplify the amount of power that is being applied to them, which is why there's such a good system for getting things done, because you don't need to apply as much pressure to have the amount of force that you need to lift heavy objects, or in this case, pull a very strong animal's head down and in. So the main problem with draw reins is that one, they're going to be teaching your horse to go into a frame where their nose comes in, and it's naturally going to teach them to go behind the vertical and do a false frame. And then the other issue with draw reins is that since you are using a pulley system to force the horse's head down, you will feel like you are being more gentle with your hands than you actually are. It's going to feel more aggressive to the horse, even if you're applying very little pressure, because that is the nature of pulley systems. What this then does is that it not only encourages the horse to go behind the vertical and go into an incorrect frame, but it's also putting the horse in a position where they have to maintain a neck set that they are not muscularly ready for, and they might have to maintain it for extended periods of time. And the rider cannot accurately feel when the horse starts to fatigue and needs to adopt a different posture. So it can cause a lot of muscular pain and discomfort. And as the muscles fatigue, the horse is going to need to use different muscles to help maintain that posture. And oftentimes those are the wrong muscles. So up here, you can see that the part of the neck that the horse is straining the most is right about here. And that is a very overdeveloped muscle group, whereas you have atrophy in the center of the neck there. And this is because of the nature of draw reins. You can tell that this horse has been ridden in training aids quite a bit because of how his muscle tone is. The nature of the overdeveloped muscles show that he probably spends a lot of time ducking behind the vertical, which again tracks because that is how draw reins apply pressure, and that is the direction that they are effectively asking the horse to bring their head. So even though draw reins may help you get your horse's head down faster, it's going to come at the cost of them developing incorrect muscle groups and going into a false frame. And it also creates habits like ducking behind the vertical that are a lot harder to fix than they are to not have occur in the first place. For anyone who's gotten a horse that has been ridden extensively in draw reins and is trying to train them to ride with their nose forward and out, they can attest to the fact that it's oftentimes very, very hard to do because they have such a pervasive tendency to tuck behind the vertical, because that is what they've been taught with the draw reins. And in order to avoid the pressure that is applied to them by the draw reins, they tuck their nose behind the vertical, and it'll become a habitual thing that they will do with or without draw reins. And even when you're being really light on the draw reins, unless there's absolutely no pressure being applied on the draw reins at all, and they are just hanging and blowing in the wind on the top side and the bottom side of them, in which case you might as well not use them because they're not being used. Unless there's no pressure being applied, they're always going to have this type of momentum where they're asking the horse to pull the horse's nose down and in. So they are not an effective training aid for teaching correct carriage. You can't force correct carriage. It's kind of the equivalent to if you're trying to learn how to do the splits, but you're not flexible enough, and someone just slams you down into the splits, you're going to injure yourself because you're not ready for it. The fact that they forced it to happen quicker doesn't mean that one, it's correct, or two, that it's comfortable or healthy for you. And this is the nature of developing horses. It takes time. You cannot force the process. You might be able to manufacture a kind of look of them doing the right thing with their head and neck, but it's going to come at the cost of the overall correctness. So I heavily encourage people to work on developing the foundational stages of correct carriage very slowly, because it does take time. What we're asking horses to do is the equivalent to getting a person to do the plank with weights on them, which we can all attest to the fact that that is very difficult. You can't just go from never having done the plank with weights to holding it for 30 plus minutes at a time. It takes time to develop that core strength. And the same is with horses. It takes time. We need to allow them the time to properly develop their fitness, muscularly and cardio-wise. And we have to put the work in to do this. We can't just use training aids to force it. And just because we can't feel the discomfort or fatigue that the horse is feeling does not mean that it's not there. And you can see it in how they develop their muscle groups in these types of training aids. So I heavily discourage people from using them for this reason, and for the overall reason of pushing horses along faster than what they should be, because that also predisposes them to lamenesses and injuries. So thank you for listening to my TED Talk.